Good afternoon, everyone. Illinois Extension is happy to host another webinar with Devon Braunstein and Shubhika Agarwal to talk about the BEAD mapping challenge. Today, they're going to give us a tour, give us more information about submitting challenges and other troubleshooting topics as well. So we really thank you both for being on here and coming back on the platform to continue outreach. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Devon.
Great, thanks so much, Nancy. So just to level set, this is a continuation of the BEAD challenge process webinars that had started this fall. We're doing a sort of January lunch and learn series that dive a level deeper into the various platforms, requirements as we get closer and closer to actually being able to launch the challenge process, which is very exciting. So today's session is on a Friday. I think going forward, most of them are on Wednesdays. So trying to be as consistent as possible. And we'll make sure that if you weren't able to register, that you do get that information. So we kind of have our consistent listserv of folks and make sure that you get all of the right up-to-date information. So thank you for bearing with us as we get our processes together. All right, let's dive in. So a pretty simple agenda today. Our first section will be an overview of the challenge process and recap with a couple of updates. So if you've been on these webinars before, this should be review, but we do have a couple of updates regarding timeline and just some processes that are sort of coming into place as we get closer to the challenge window. Then we'll do a preview of the BEAD challenge map. So we're going to walk you through what that map looks like. It is not live just yet, but want to start getting folks familiar with the different functionalities and what you'll be able to see on that map. And then we'll close with next steps and Q&A. A couple of objectives. After this webinar, participants will know what the BEAD challenge process is, why it's important, and how to participate. Be familiar with current and upcoming resources, and understand the key features of the challenge map and how it fits into the broader challenge process. So section 1 is our recap of the challenge process and updates. Again, maybe review, but a little review for a pretty complex process never hurts. So thanks again for bearing with us. So what is the goal of BEAD? BEAD is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. Illinois was awarded $1.4 billion to connect all unserved and underserved locations to broadband over the next 5 years. A couple of highlights on the right. We're encouraged to use fiber wherever possible. We'll initiate our sub-grantee selection process at the close of the challenge process and approval of our Volume 1 and Volume 2 initial proposals. Then we'll have 1 year to select our sub-grantees and then 4 years to complete that implementation. We'll prioritize access for unserved and underserved locations, plus community anchor institutions and Wi-Fi equipment for multi-dwelling units as funding allows. And we'll review all those terms again. And we'll also have a low-cost broadband service option and a middle-class affordability plan. So this slide kind of shows you where the challenge process fits into these broader steps of BEAD that the state is required to go through. So the 5-year plan was published, submitted, and approved. Then we have initial proposal volume 1, which describes the challenge process. This is the big milestone that we're waiting on right now. So we've been going through the curing process with NTIA. We completed that initial review, which is a huge milestone. And now volume 1 is in final review with NTIA. Once we get that approval, we have the green light to start the challenge process. So if you see a bunch of asterisks around the dates, much of it is due to waiting on that final NTIA approval that we need to kick off. Then we have initial proposal volume 2, which describes in a lot of detail the grant process. This is in progress, it's been submitted, and we've incorporated public feedback and are waiting NTIA feedback. Then, of course, we have the challenge process, which is what we'll double click on today. And then following that, the sub-grantee selection process in that 365-day window following our full end-to-end challenge process. And so now this is the double click on that challenge process. So what are kind of the big steps here? The first step is pre-registration. So pre-registration is open right now. If you are planning to participate in the challenge process, you need to pre-register, and we'll have a little bit more information on that. The next big milestone is locations eligible for the challenge process or ineligible will be published through the map. Then the challenge process will open. That map needs to be live for 7 days prior to the opening of the challenge process. After that challenge window closes, the state will do some analysis of the challenges we've received. For valid challenges, they'll be sent off to the respective internet service providers who will have the chance to either accept the challenges or submit a rebuttal with evidence. Then we'll go through adjudication, make final determinations, and publish that final map. A couple of dates here to highlight. In past webinars, we had been aiming for mid-January for starting that challenge window. Based on the timeline of NTIA, it's looking like it could be around January 29th. So it could be as early as January 29th. It could be a few days after that, but that's really what we're tracking towards. And then, of course, that map will be available to the public for you to peruse 7 days prior to the opening of the challenge window. So a quick reminder of what is the challenge process, what is its purpose. First, to make sure that the state's broadband map accurately reflects everyone's home or organization's access to broadband and tells us which locations are eligible for funding. Who can submit challenges? We call these eligible entities, and that includes units of local government, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers. These 3 groups can submit challenges directly through the portal. While individuals cannot participate directly, they can share challenges or evidence with one of those 3 eligible entities who can submit on their behalf. You may have heard about our speed test tool, beadchallenge.org. That is something that an individual can participate in because it will ultimately be submitted by a nonprofit. What can be challenged? Any location displayed on that BEAD challenge map. That's either a broadband serviceable location, which means it's a home or a business, or a community anchor institution, which was defined through our Volume 1 submission, but some examples include schools, libraries, various community service providers. So we can share more about that definition if you're interested. And then when will it be held? Challenge process could open as early as January 29th and will run for between 2 and 4 weeks. Again, exact timing is dependent on NTIA approval of our initial proposal, Volume 1. So bird's eye view, what does this challenge process actually look like? What will you see as a user? Step 1 is that pre-registration. This is a very simple form where you say who you are, which kind of bucket of entity you fall into. You share some information with us and submit. Step 2, this is going to be our focus for today. This is the challenge map where you can kind of peruse through, look at the different locations on the map, select a location for a challenge, and then that brings us to step 3, which is actually submitting evidence of the challenge in the portal. So we'll be having more information on that in the coming few weeks as we get closer to opening up that window. So a reminder on this, I won't go through all of these, but if you are submitting a challenge through the portal, you'll need to determine or indicate what type of challenge you are submitting. So on what grounds are you challenging a location's broadband service? Is it speed? Is it availability? Is it latency? Is it plan service? Is it whether or not a location should or should not be a community anchor institution? So I know we've had lots of other webinars on these, more to come on templates for what information you'll need based on your challenge type. But if you have questions about this, let's put a pin in that and save it for the end of the webinar. So there will be 2 ways to submit challenges. First is through the BEAD challenge map, which again, we'll go through today. And this way is recommended for entities or folks who may not have access to the FCC Fabric data. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, or you know that you don't have access, then navigating through the BEAD challenge map will be the way to go, because when you select locations there, it picks up all of the required data points that you'll need for your challenge, most importantly, that location ID, and it carries it to your challenge portal. If you do have FCC Fabric data, you'll already have the location IDs for each location. And in this case, you can do a bulk upload directly to the challenge portal. You're still welcome to use the map, but you kind of have both options there. And the map is also great for if you maybe only want to submit one challenge or you want to grab a couple. It's very easy to kind of like manually determine which locations you might want to challenge. So key terms and definitions, broadband serviceable location, or BSL. This is any business or residential location in our state where broadband internet service is or can be installed. We have our thresholds of unserved, underserved, and served. Unserved means a location that doesn't have any broadband access. So they do not have access to 25/3 megabits per second. Maybe they have access to something lower than that, but based on the FCC's definitions, they do not have access to broadband. Underserved is that next layer up. So this location might have access to 25/3 speeds, but not that second threshold of 100/20 megabits per second. Additionally, a location could qualify as underserved if its latency is greater than 100 milliseconds. And then a location is served if it has access to speeds of 100/20 megabits per second or higher. Community Anchor Institution, or CAI, is an institution that provides critical services and support to residents, particularly those in underrepresented communities. These are definitions that we have been kind of refining with NTIA over the past month, and will be published once that initial proposal, volume 1, is confirmed. A multi-dwelling unit, or MDU, is a structure with multiple but separate housing units. In plain English, it's an apartment building with at least 2 units. And finally, latency, it's the time it takes data to go to a server and back to your connection. So you have high latency, meaning over 100 milliseconds. It could cause video meetings to be choppy or freeze. So good latency is under 100 milliseconds. All right, pre-registration. So I mentioned that I would go into this in a little bit more detail. This is a simple form. We have many pre-registrations already, so thank you for those who submitted this form, but we're asking you to pre-register for 2 reasons. One, you'll receive information about when the challenge process is starting and different milestones along the way. And 2, we need to verify your identity. So we need to make sure that you are indeed an eligible entity to participate. So we'll send along that link. A quick change, we had been working off of a pre-registration deadline of today, January 12th. Given that it will be a couple more weeks until the challenge process opens, we are extending that deadline, still encouraging folks to pre-register as soon as you can, but also leaving it open that if someone needs to pre-register during the challenge process, that's fine. But we will need to kind of go back and generate a username and password so you can access the portal, and the turnaround time could be a day or 2. So it's easiest to just get that out of the way as early as today. Some new information here. So I mentioned the rebuttal piece of this challenge process. So after the challenge window closes and the state organizes all of the data and evidence that came through, internet service providers who serve or indicate that they serve certain locations will receive challenge information and have an opportunity to submit a rebuttal. So their own evidence that that challenge is or is not substantiated. So if you're an ISP who serves Illinois, you should have received an email from me around 11:40 a.m. this morning. And if you did not, then please reach out to me or contact someone in your organization who may be our sort of state point of contact. But we're essentially just asking you to complete a form to tell us who should receive that rebuttal information. And we also ask that that person completes the pre-registration. It could be more than one person, but just make sure to have each person complete that form and to pre-register. If you're an ISP and you didn't see an email come through and none of this sounds familiar, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get that information. All right, and then I think this is our final update before we dive into some of the map screenshots. So in a previous webinar, we talked through the pre-challenge modifications, and these are modifications that the Office of Broadband can make to the map ahead of the challenge process. So the update here is that the DSL technology will remain as we had shared. So locations considered served by DSL technology will be considered underserved on the map. But the multi-dwelling unit pre-modification that we had shared previously, we received feedback from NTIA, and are not able to make this change ahead of the challenge process, but we'll work with folks to submit those challenges, or we'll encourage folks to submit any challenges during the challenge window as they see fit. So this is just based on NTIA guidance and kind of what they're sharing with all states. And I think finally, yes, final page, we have a landing page with all things challenge process. Here's a screenshot. So it has the basics, it has recording, slides, pre-registration link, anything you need to know. So I recommend writing down or bookmarking the short link I have here because that is the best way to just get access to resources quickly. dceo.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge. And on that website, we do have previous questions and answers that we responded to in webinars live typed up. So we're staying consistent and accountable to what we've been saying. And if you have questions about anything on there or see something missing, please let us know and we'll be sure to correct that. I'll flash that up one more time so anyone can write it down. All right. So BEAD challenge map preview. So we're about to show you some kind of screenshots of the main functionality of this map that will be live, could be as early as January 22nd based on the final loose ends that we're tying up with regard to confirming all of our data. So just to put this in perspective, when and how will the BEAD challenge map be useful? So like I shared, to submit a challenge, a user must have the broadband serviceable locations location ID. Some eligible entities, maybe ISPs, maybe some government entities, will already have access to the FCC Fabric data, which will include this information. So if that is you, you might be all set. But I know that many challengers will not have Fabric data access or may just want to submit one single challenge, or someone with location IDs would like to assess the eligibility of certain locations. So if that sounds like you or a user you know, then this is where the map comes into play. So a challenger can use the map to search for a location by address or zip code, or just kind of manually zoom into certain areas, view various locations, eligibility status, and broadband availability, and then select a location or multiple locations to submit a challenge originating from the map. So again, it pulls from the map and takes that information right to the challenge portal. And the benefit of this is the user does not have to scramble and search for the location ID. It is automatically pulled from the map into the challenge portal. One note before I go deeper into these screenshots, the map is in beta version right now. It's being tested. We're incorporating some final data. So data is subject to change prior to publication. If you see anything that looks funky, we are on it. Okay, so first piece here is navigating the homepage. So when you visit the map, this is what you will see when you first get to the homepage. You can search for locations, look at broadband service options reported, check eligibility, select locations to challenge, and then bring that over to the challenge portal. So kind of starting high level and zooming in, on the left-hand side, you have 3 tabs on this sort of pane. The first tab is filters, and this is to select the types of locations that you want to view. So do you want to see community anchor institutions? Do you want to see broadband serviceable locations? One or the other, both at the same time. And I'll go into detail on that. Just to note, when you first get to this map, you won't see any locations on the map. You'll just see this outline. That's because you're too far away. So to view specific locations, use this search bar to search for a location, or just manually zoom in, and then the layers and filters will be enabled and you'll start to see little dots. The second tab is called Broadband Sites. So once you start zooming in, you will see the locations that you see on a map will also appear to the left-hand side on the panel with some more information. And then the third tab is Challenges. So once you add locations to your challenge, you'll see them on this third tab listed. And then there's some various features around there that I'll go through. All right, so let's zoom in on the filters. So again, this is the first tab on that left-hand panel. So I'm going to walk through the filters, and this operates like other sort of map filters that you may have used before, where when you select it and you see that white check mark on a blue background, you are viewing that category on the map. If you uncheck it, then you won't see that category on the map. So the first line here is community anchor institutions. So when this is checked, community anchor institutions will appear on the map as boxes, either a green check mark or a red X. If it is green, that means it is eligible for funding due to its status of being unserved. So it does not have access to 1 gigabit service symmetrical. And a reminder that the definitions of served and unserved for community anchor institutions, because they're institutions or organizations, this is going to be different than the definition for households and residential spaces. So green, think of in any case, whenever you see a green icon, it is eligible for funding. If a community anchor institution icon is red, this means it is not eligible for funding due to its status of being served. So based on our geographical analysis, it is in close enough proximity to be able to access that 1 gigabit symmetrical service. The second grouping here is broadband serviceable locations. So these will be little circles with the Wi-Fi symbol. Similarly, if they're green, and then in this case yellow, this means they are eligible for funding due to their status of being unserved or underserved. Note that here we have a differentiation between unserved and underserved. So if it is unserved, no access to 25/3, it'll be green. And if it is underserved, meaning has access to 25/3, but not 100/20, or not 100, not less than 100 milliseconds, then it'll be yellow. So still eligible, but it is underserved. If it's red, that means it is not eligible for funding because it is served. It has that connection. So then going down to this third pane here, these are 2 additional filters. So the first one is enforceable commitments. If you select the enforceable commitment filter, then you will see locations that are confirmed to be served by federal funding sources or state funding sources. So this is, let's say that a provider got a federal grant to cover a certain region and connect it to fiber within the next year, within the next 2 years. That is program dependent. Then that status will override its current status. So a location may currently only have access to 25/3, but if it is an enforceable commitment and we know it's getting fiber within that certain time period, it'll be marked as not eligible for funding because someone is already taking care of it. The second filter down here is multi-dwelling units. So if you click on multi-dwelling units, then you will see MDUs on the map. And as a reminder, MDUs are residential buildings with 2 or more units. This follows the same color scheme of other BSLs. And because multiple dwelling units are broadband serviceable locations, they won't have any sort of different icon, neither will enforceable commitments. They'll just reflect the little Wi-Fi icons or community anchor institution So multi-dwelling units are residential, homes. If they're green or yellow, this means that they are eligible for funding due to their status of being unserved or underserved. And if they're red, this means that it is not eligible for funding because it is already served. So a couple of examples of what the screen will look like when you have different filters activated. So in this case, we have just our community anchor institution filter activated. So by selecting CAI and deselecting broadband serviceable location filter, the user will only see those square community anchor institutions, which is what you can see on the slide right now. So you see a bunch of red X's, red boxes. Those are all CAIs, and all of these happen to not be eligible for funding. So I'm going to go through the filters, but this is all the same screen. This is all the same location. So you can kind of see how it changes. So then in this next scenario, I select broadband serviceable location, but I deselect community anchor institution. So now we're seeing just broadband serviceable locations. And so you can see there are no squares on there because we're not looking at any CAIs. We're only looking at BSLs. So you have a bunch of the Wi-Fi signals. I see some red, I see some yellow. So it looks like we have mostly not eligible locations with maybe a couple of eligible locations squeezed in there. And then finally, in this scenario, we've selected BSLs and multi-dwelling units. So by selecting BSLs and MDUs, a user will only see BSLs that are also MDUs. So there are a couple here. You can see 2 MDUs. They're red because they're not eligible for funding. When you select enforceable commitment, the user will only see enforceable commitments. So these are considered ineligible for funding because someone is already committed to them, whether through a state grant or a federal grant. And so they'll be red. And when you click into one of these BSLs, you just click on it, you'll see some information to the right, including enforceable commitment, yes, and that's where I have that orange box. So this is an example screen of broadband serviceable locations, just to show you what it looks like when they're green. So this means that they are eligible for funding. And you can click into them to see different things. So on the bottom, you can see an underserved BSL, and because it's yellow, it is eligible for funding. That means it's underserved. What I have shown on the bottom is you can click into provider and actually see listed out the providers who might serve that address or that location, their technology, and then the highest speeds available per technology. At the top, you can see an example of clicking into a community anchor institution. Again, you can see some of that information of eligibility, what type it is, the address, things like that. Okay, next we'll look at selecting locations and adding them to your challenge. So there are 3 ways to select a location and add it to your challenge. The first is probably the most easy and intuitive. You search for a location, whether that's an address or a zip code, and you click on it, and then you can just click add to challenge. So on the right-hand side here, we've clicked on this 15387 Anderland Road. You can see some information about it, and we can see that it is unserved, so it's green, it's eligible. But if I want to challenge it and say, actually, it is served, I'm an ISP and I serve that location, I have evidence to prove it, I'm going to add it to my challenge. In that case, I would click add to challenge. Once you add it to the challenge, you'll see a little exclamation point pop up on this 3rd tab on the left called challenges. And so you can navigate there and see all of your challenges, and you can delete them, add them, but that's kind of where they're stored. So again, anytime you see that blue add to challenge button, they all go into that challenges 3rd tab. The second way to select a location and to add to challenge is from the Broadband Sites tab. So let's say you just search for a zip code or you're zoomed into a general area. You haven't clicked on one location or another. Some of the locations that are kind of in your view will just pop up on the left-hand side as a list. And so you can look through them, click on providers, check out what's there, and then add to challenge if you so choose. And again, they'll go into that third tab, challenges. And then the third option is using the select tool. So this one allows you to do, is to be a little bit more nuanced. So on the top right, you can see this white arrow and the orange box around this little hand. And that's the select tool. So it's kind of equivalent to like holding down shift and selecting a lot of things. You don't need to hold anything down. You can just select that and select locations. And then they'll all be highlighted and you can click on add to challenge. Another feature that you can use with this same little select tool is lasso challenges. So you can draw a shape around a certain area, and then let's say you accidentally grab something that you didn't want to grab, you can click it again to deselect it and add those to your challenge. And once again, go back to your challenges tab, and you can edit that or move forward as you see fit. Okay, so once a challenge is added to the challenges tab, this is what you'll see. So clicked on challenges, third tab, you can see it listed here. Let's say you want to remove this challenge or remove it from your challenge. There's a couple places you can see, you can just click remove from challenge. Once your challenge is added, so again, we're in our challenge tab here. There's a couple of features that I want to walk through. If you hover your mouse over each of these buttons, you'll see a little description, but I'll walk through them now. So the first button on the left, submit challenges. This is, you have your set of challenges and you want to go forward with uploading your evidence and moving through the process. Click on submit challenges and you'll be taken to the challenge portal, which we have not shown you yet, but that will be an upcoming webinar. The second one, B, and I kind of have corresponding letters on the left to their description on the right. So let's say you added a bunch and you changed your mind or wanted to delete them. Click B and it just deletes them all at once. C is if you want to view your challenges in a table, just kind of a little bit of a different format. D, the little floppy disk, means save as CSV. So if you want to, grab a bunch, download them, do some analysis, save them for later, you can just save them as a CSV file. And then E is upload a CSV of previously saved locations. So if you completed that saving a CSV, a week later you come back and you want to upload them, you can use this function. Note that you can't upload bulk locations in any other way. They have to have come directly from the portal. So the main use case is you download them and you want to come back to it and you can re-upload them. I will say when you exit out of the challenge map, it automatically saves everything that you were doing. And then when you re-enter the challenge map, it'll ask you, do you want to continue where you left off or start from scratch? So you'll have that option. So this is a zoom in on that C here, the little grid. If you click on that, you'll see something like this. So a table, just another way to kind of look at this. And finally, just some other features. So I have a lot on this slide. Let's start from the left, top left, and I'll go around in a circle. So the plus means zoom in and the minus means zoom out. You can do that manually, just clicking it a bunch of times, or you can, again, search for an address. On the bottom left in that filters grouping, you can click on census block group, and then you'll see the delineating lines between different census blocks. Just kind of another helpful tool if that is interesting to you. On the bottom left, there's a little I. This is just a simple function if you want to view the credits of base map contributors. So like, where did this map come from? On the bottom right, there's a question mark. Here, there will be a user guide that you can view and download that has a detailed description of all of these functionalities. Moving up to the right, top right, that little hand I spoke about, you can click this to select locations to challenge, either selecting a single location or using the lasso tool to select a group of locations. You can click it to start using it, and if you want to get back to your regular cursor, just unclick it. Up top on the top right, you can also view this page in Spanish. So that's the end of the initial preview. I'm hoping we can have a demo ready perhaps in next week's webinar, but this map will be publicly available at least 7 days before the start of the challenge process. So you can start poking around, looking at the status of things and making your plans. Next steps, a couple of recaps here. Pre-register for the challenge process if you would like to participate, or if you are an ISP and you are going to be the sort of rebuttal point of contact, you want to receive the challenges, and you'll be then submitting rebuttal information. Just pre-register so we have your info and can get you credentials sooner than later. Upcoming webinars, we'll do a deep dive on uploading bulk challenges. So we'll have a series of CSV templates and kind of walk through what those mean, what the different terms mean, common pitfalls and how to avoid them, and get your feedback. We'll do a walkthrough of the portal once that is live. We'll also plan to have office hours and TA sessions once the portal is live. So if you're just having trouble with something, myself or Shubhika will be available to help you troubleshoot. And then an end-to-end challenge process training. So kind of going from the map through the portal to submitting, or preparing your CSV and then submitting. And then just to make sure that you have the latest information, the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter comes, I think, every 2 weeks. So be sure to sign up for that because that is the best way to track what's going on. And then that landing page, dco.illinois.gov/BEAD challenge, will have all of the up-to-date resources. And so with that, I'll pause and we'll take any questions. And I'm just catching up on the chat here. So Nancy, Shubhika, let me know if, let's see.
Yeah, and I think I've also been answering some of the questions in the chat. So we had this one about an accurate way to challenge fixed wireless speeds. So the example shared here was, for instance, if a WISP claims 200 by 50 speeds for 15 miles away from the tower, but they only get that speed in 1 mile from the tower, what would be like one of the ways to challenge? So what we recommend is really thinking of this in terms of an area challenge. So if there are like those large spaces of area where you think, those fixed wireless speeds are not as reported, really targeting at least 6 locations in the census block group. So again, that is also the reason we have that layer on the challenge map so that you can help, plan some of those locations or outreach efforts that you want to carry out in your community. So if we have 6 of those, that would trigger an area challenge, and that is if it is successful for a particular technology and a single provider. That would be the way to go. And then we had a follow-up question from Kat in terms of if you were working from the area challenge perspective, would a yes in the enforceable commitment notation still disqualify it from being challenged if it's found in any of the 6 resident locations, or only if it qualifies to all 6 of them? So how I understand this question is really trying to get a sense of how the area challenge is triggered. So if there are those 6 locations, an area challenge is definitely going to be triggered irrespective of whether it's covered by an enforceable commitment or not. But at the end of the challenge process, if it's successful and the provider is not able to share evidence for covering that entire census block group, it's going to be marked as eligible for funding. But any location that is covered through enforceable commitments would still be ineligible because that's going to be covered through that particular program in its timeline that's specific to that program. So I hope that helps clarify that question if there are any follow-ups. Happy to get to those as well.
Shubhika, this might be a question for you. Remy is asking about, is it possible to provide a CSV file listing all of the unserved or underserved BSLs, or should we exclusively refer to the map? And similarly, is it possible to get a list of the status of community anchor institutions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Remy. So based on NTIA guidelines, the state is supposed to be publishing a final list of unserved, underserved, and served locations before we start with the challenge process. So that's going to be posted 1 week in advance. So you will have that list of unserved and underserved. And as our final list of CAIs is ready, we'll also make that available. So any location that does not currently have access to gigabit symmetrical service would be listed as eligible on the map. So yes, both of those lists will be made available.
And Shubhika, to confirm, so I know the CAI list will definitely be available, at least eligible. The list of eligible CAIs is what we're required to publish by NTIA. In terms of the BSLs, in addition to the map being available 7 days in advance, are we planning to publish a CSV or like an Excel file version of what's behind that?
Yes, we can certainly do that. The only caveat to that would be that it's only going to be location IDs. So anybody who wants to utilize that data should also have access to the fabric so that they can make sense of that data. But then for others, like, that group who does not have access to fabric, that is why we also have the map. So you can still visualize those eligibility status. But the CSV might not be helpful for users who do not have access to the FCC fabric.
And one clarification, so on this question, you ask, should we exclusively refer to the FCC broadband map? So I want to make a recommendation or clarification that for this specific process, we are not looking at the FCC map. We are looking at this new and improved BEAD challenge map that should be more granular and more up to date than the FCC map. And so anything on this BEAD map, once we publish it, will kind of be up for eligible to be challenged.
And I think just one more nuance to that, Devon. So I think this is also important that we refer to the BEAD challenge, the Illinois BEAD challenge map for this phase of the process, because we'll also account for state and federal enforceable commitments on this map. The FCC broadband map currently does not have that. It only shares availability. So that is why, it might confuse you in terms of eligibility status, because that does not account for enforceable commitments. So looking at the Illinois BEAD challenge map would be the best resource.
I'm looking at the next question here from Kurt. Am I correct that a municipality should pre-register and its citizens would submit challenges under the municipality's registration? So yes, that it's most important that the municipality pre-registers, and you can certainly work with residents to collect evidence for challenges. So let's say that they live in a home where on the map it says that they have access to 25/3 speeds, and in their experience they do not. Their evidence might include a conversation, an email or a chat with a internet service provider saying that they cannot get those speeds, or looking up their serviceability on that ISP's website. So they can provide that information to you as a municipality, and you can submit it on their behalf. So that's kind of option one. And you can do that for any of those. I'll go back to this table of challenge types at the beginning. You can submit for any of these. We have another option, and more information is available on that landing page, but there is a speed test tool called beadchallenge.org where individuals can participate directly using the speed test tool, and they can take, even starting now, because it is 60 days, at least 60 days before the challenge process opens, or within 60 days of the challenge process opening, individuals can complete a speed test they need to do 3 tests over 3 different calendar days. And if they would like to submit that as a challenge, there will be a prompt to input information like their address and their name and their email. They can opt into getting reminders to take those, and then all of that will be submitted. All valid challenges will be submitted by the Internet Equity Initiative, which is a nonprofit. So kind of streamlining that process a little bit. And we have lots of materials on that on the landing page. We're happy to chat one-on-one about kind of the nuances there. Kat is second guessing whether or not you finished pre-registering. So the original set of pre-registrations that we received, we did send a confirmation email, although many have come in since then. So we'll be planning to send a second wave of confirmation emails. If you did not have all of the information, then I would suggest just going ahead and you can fill out the form again and just make sure that everything is correct. The big piece is going to be, we will be verifying your EIN or your FRN to make sure that you are an eligible entity. And then if you are verified, the big piece is you'll get credentials to actually access the challenge portal once that's available. So you should be receiving both just confirmation of, yes, we have you in the system, and then your actual credentials much closer to the challenge window opening. I'm also happy to just do a manual check if you're in there, so don't hesitate to email me. I know I've done that with a handful of you. Okay, Dwayne asked, I work for a CAI but would like to travel and test various other sites. Is this possible, and how would I register? So I guess it depends. So for taking a speed test, if you want to submit a speed test challenge, that test needs to be taken by the individual who is subscribed to internet in that home or in that entity. So you could not go to one of your customers' homes and take a speed test, but you could give them the information that they need to take a speed test over 3 days, 3 speed tests over 3 separate days, and then sort of support them as they submit it. Or they could give you the information as a nonprofit. You can pre-register and then you can submit it on their behalf. So I would say there's kind of like 2 different paths here. One is the speed test path, and I would encourage just like education about the process for taking speed tests. And we have lots of graphics and how-tos on the landing page. For other types of challenges like those listed on this slide, you may need to just work with them directly to get evidence and then submit it on their behalf. Any other questions? Any questions about the map that I showed? I know that was a lot, and it'll be much easier when you can play around with it yourselves. So we're working hard to get that available soon, potentially the 22nd or at least a few days after that. All right. Well, if that's it, then perhaps we can close out. And I think let's put a couple of things in the chat. So Shubhika and I will put our emails here. And for specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out directly. This is mine. You have the landing page in the chat. And then Nancy, I'm wondering if you have the registration link just to make sure everyone is registered for all of the challenge lunch and learns for the next month.
Sounds good.
Great. All right, so there's the registration link. You'll see that these sessions are a little bit more like technical and detailed oriented. We've also had some more community facing training. So everything's on the challenge landing page, and again, Shubhika and I are always happy to just chat one-on-one because there's a lot here. So appreciate all of your participation. And thank you, Nancy, so much for hosting. I think we can close out. Oh, the next one, I believe, is next Wednesday at noon. And then they will be Wednesday at noon for the next 2 weeks.
Very good. Devon, thank you so much for your time today. This is great to continue to get people to refine their skills and understanding of the bead mapping challenge, and hopefully we'll slowly get everyone on board throughout the state, et cetera. So really want to thank everyone for coming today, and we will see you next week, next Wednesday at noon. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, team.
Bye.
Good day.